Now we're rolling. Damage Plan MMA podcast. I'm Jason, back again with my man Blake Arulian to give you guys another Fighter Spotlight podcast. We're welcoming Mr. Raymond Lawley, who will be fighting for the Fierce Fighting Championship Amateur Featherweight Championship next weekend, June 25th at the Maverick Center. Man, that was like a long tongue twister there. I needed to take a deep breath before I said all that. Raymond, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Raymond, you have had an interesting career already, an undefeated fighter, and you're fighting for the 145-pound belt on next Saturday, I should say. Where does this rank amongst the most important fights of your career, and is this something that's almost like a dream come true for you?
Important fights, I'd say it's the most important fight I've had so far, yeah. Like, every fighter should think their next fight should always be their most important. And I'm super excited for it. But, you know, I'm not putting any unnecessary pressure on myself, letting this get to me. You know, a fight's a fight at the end of the day, right? It's like anything can happen in there. Anyone can knock anybody out. So it's like if I don't overhype it myself, stay calm and execute, I'll get done what I need to get done.
You take a little bit more time than like the average amateur fighter in between fights, from 5 months up to all the way past a year. And I wonder, is that kind of calculated? Are you looking for the right opponent at the right time? Are you really working on your time off to take a little bit of extra time in between fights to make sure you're improving every time you step into the cage?
Nah, that's not planned at all. That's pretty. I've been actively looking for fights, and it's been hard to find one. I don't know what's been going on. Maybe it's the COVID excuse for everybody. But my last fight was in October. I boxed in March, and then I tried to fight in April. Couldn't find an opponent. Well, they found one, but ended up not being able to make it down to Idaho. So is what it is. So I try to take them whenever I can. But if it doesn't happen, I continue to work. And I've had a lot of canceled fights. A lot of hard camps kind of go to waste. But you always learn something and gain something from a camp, no matter what happens, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say, Raymond, what do you know about your opponent, Zac Hamilton?
I know he comes from a solid gym out down there at Ajima. He's 4-1. He lost his last title fight fairly quickly, and he has, I think, his fight that he won last was the first one he went full distance to decision. So I know he likes to finish his fights quickly, and I'd like to get a finish in this fight since my last two have gone to decision. But other than that, not much.
What have you learned about in your last 3 fights about yourself, and how have you grown in between each fight?
I've learned, you know, even though honestly in those fights I could say I wasn't like mentally ready to get in there, but I did it anyways just because I needed to for my career. I know how to grind and how to win. You know, I know I have a good fight IQ. I know how to stay safe. I know how to take minimal damage as possible and secure a victory. So.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So obviously coming down here to Salt Lake City to fight, this will be your first time fighting in Utah, correct?
Yeah.
Nice. What are you expecting? You expecting to get booed from the hometown crowd, or are you just not even worried about it? You just coming here to pull the upset?
I'm not really worried about it at all. I mean, I've been down there for fights that haven't happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, the crowd down there is always a good time. You know, I've never disrespect any of my teammates, so I'm excited. They always show up. They're always pretty rowdy, so I'm excited.
I love it, man. I love it.
Talking about Zac, the opponent that you have, do you expect it to – what is your game plan, I guess I should say? A lot of your fights, you are a really dominant wrestler. You're able to take people down, but Zac has a lot of submission wins. So I'm curious if that's still a part of your game plan, if you think that you don't need to deviate from the game plan because of how dominant you've already been.
Man, game plan is – honestly, yeah, we're going to mix in a little bit of wrestling here and there. We're going to – obviously, you need to test the waters a little bit. I want to see how good he is off his back. I want to see how good his grappling is, and if it isn't what I think it is, then we'll continue to wrestle, continue to drag him around the cage if we have to, but I'm also not opposed to standing there and exchanging strikes with him. So I have no problem doing that.
I wanted to circle back because you caught something. You said you took a boxing match earlier this year. Is that something that you're passionate about doing, or is something that you want to continue to do, or is that just kind of a one-off thing? Hey, I need to get a fight in.
That's something I want to continue to do for sure.
Awesome.
Because it's with amateur MMA, it's like if you can't get a fight in, like boxers, they fight every 2 weeks, right? Yeah. MMA, it's like every month. So I don't want to be wasting camps and not get activity in, because I had a camp in January. Like it was January to I was supposed to fight in April. So I had a few months. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll get a tune-up fight in March, right? I was like, let's take a boxing match. So I took it. I felt fresh. I felt good. My weight was on point. I didn't have to cut any weight for the boxing bout. And then fight ended up not happening in April, but I still felt good enough that I've been active recently that I could fight anybody in June. So nice. I'm glad this fight came around.
Heck yeah.
Was taking that fight, is that something you've really been working on as your hands? Because I actually called one of your fights a couple years ago in Idaho. And so I remember how dominant of a grappler you were, but it's interesting seeing that you've taken a boxing match now. Is that something you've been really working on as your hands?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know I have good striking. It's just you have to get in there and do it right. You have to be able to stay calm under pressure, not let outside influences in the crowd get to you, and be able to focus. It's a little hard, when you're getting punched in the face and people are cheering and screaming. It's like, my second fight, I got dropped in like the first 10 seconds, and I was like, whole crowd went silent. And I was like, all right, we're going to wrestle here. We're not going to keep striking. It's
I remember that. That was the fight I called.
Yeah.
That was crazy. That was absolutely crazy. You came back, you were super dominant. So, goes to show that you can adjust in there. Do you think that that's one of your best, one of the things that you do really well is you're able to kind of, if I need to strike, I'm going to be able to box with this guy. If I need to grapple, I can wrestle this guy and take him down.
Yeah, absolutely. Adjusting on the fly. Like if you're not able to do that in MMA, you're going to be in for a long night every time you step in the cage, because absolutely anything can happen, Like look at the fights last weekend, right? Who thought,
oh yeah,
choke out Glover? Like you never know what's going to happen. So you have to be able to adjust on the fly, fight everywhere.
I love it, man. I just love to hear how you're progressing in your fight career and taking those boxing matches and bettering yourself and becoming that well-rounded fighter, which I feel like, and I think Blake can agree, I feel like nowadays you have to have that. You have to have all those tools in the back pocket to be able to pull out. You can't just come in there being a dominant wrestler or a dominant striker. You got to have something else to kind of fall back on, like you said, when times get tough. So I got to applaud you for that, man.
Raymond, I wanted to ask you, honestly, for research purposes, but how far did you go as in combat before you started taking fights? Did you start in Taekwondo? Did you start wrestling? What are the accolades you've had before you started your amateur MMA career?
I started wrestling when I was 6. I wrestled till I was about 14, 15, and then I ended up breaking my leg and I completely quit. But I was never a good wrestler at all,
Really?
I'd districts and never placed. I was really overweight as a kid as well, so I just wasn't athletic. And everybody, started hitting puberty, and I was just getting destroyed every time I hopped on the mat. So that's why, going in and, I'm not, afraid to lose. I think that's a big thing a lot of amateurs need to make sure that they're capable of, is being able to lose, because it's like at the end of the day, this record's not going to matter. It's taken on the chin and improve. So I'm excited to compete and ready to compete no matter the result.
Man, that's awesome, man. That's a great attitude to have. Zac and I talk about that all the time on the podcast. Like, I mean, how are you going to know where you're at in this game if you're not testing yourself, especially as an amateur?
Yeah, exactly.
That's good, man.
Speaking of testing yourself, we kind of talked about that with Zac a little bit, and how he's probably one of the tougher guys that you fought. In your last fight, you also faced an undefeated fighter. How much did you learn facing someone who had a little bit more experience, but also hadn't taken a loss either?
I felt pretty good at that fight. Like, honestly, my last fight, I didn't take any damage at all. I don't even think I got punched in the face, if I'm going to be completely honest. I had no bruises on my face. I mean, honestly, that was like probably should have been a 30-26. Like I just did whatever I wanted in there. And that kid had a lot of Muay Thai experience, and he had MMA experience as well. And now it's like after that, I think he piled together 2 or 3 finishes after my fight. So he's either like 5-1 or 4-2 or something after. He's really good. So I mean, I think Zac is probably that's why I'd say I'm not sure if he is the toughest test I've faced, but I'm treating him like it for sure, right? So, because that kid came from Owen that I fought last, came from AKA Trevor Prangley, and they're surrounded by killers up there. So it feels good to know that to fight a higher caliber opponent on paper and be able to dominate them feels good.
Yeah.
Makes me feel like I have a good skill set and I have a good team behind me. I just need the experience and the ring time to really put everything together.
Nice. So obviously you're coming up next weekend, June 25th. How do you see the fight playing out on June 25th at the Maverick Center?
Man, honestly, I'm thinking it's going to be an early night at the office. So I'm looking for,
I love it.
I want to finish bad. My last 2 fights went to decision, and it's fun to, pile up ring time and cage time and get used to it. But it's like, now it's time to put on a little bit of a show, entertain the crowd a little bit. So I'm excited. I mean, in my opinion, I only got a few more Ami fights left, maybe 3 or 4. And it's like, now it's time to have fun and perform in there instead of
awesome
win.
So hungry for the submission. Is that by TKO? Is that by knockout? Is that by submission?
Whatever presents itself. I mean, if a knockout comes, obviously the crowd's going to love that, right?
Yes, we will. Yeah. And hey, we'll be calling your fight. So both of us will be calling your fight. So we'll love it.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude. Whatever presents itself, I'm going to snatch it. If it's his neck, if it's his arm, if I catch him with a punch, whatever it is, I'm looking for it. So I feel sharp right now. I feel good. I feel really strong. Weight's on point. So I'm ready to go.
Awesome, man. Blake, I don't have any more questions. Do you have any other questions?
I'm good. I think we covered just about everything. Raymond, I really appreciate it. Thank you for getting back to me and making sure that we could do this. It was really nice to get to talk to you.
Yeah.
One quick thing. Do you have any sponsors you want to give a shout out to? Anybody you want to shout out to?
Yeah, I do. I want to give a shout out to Competitive Edge, Meridian, Idaho, and then D's Custom Metal Fabrication and Top Crop, Ontario.
Awesome, man. Hey, Fierce Fighting Championship number 20, June 25th at the Maverick Center. If you don't have tickets, I put the link in the bio here. Make sure you click on Raymond's picture, show support for your local MMA fighters. Come out, enjoy a great night of fights. Raymond, thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Friday for weigh-ins, brother.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
All right. We